Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Vaughn Vandegrift came to Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville in July 2004 as the 7th Chancellor. His stated goal was to develop SIUE into a premier metropolitan institution. By 2011, the president of the SIU system, Glenn Poshard, stated that Chancellor Vandegrift had accomplished much of what he was hired to do. Dr. Poshard said the substantial progress SIUE has made toward achieving national recognition speaks to the success he has orchestrated during his tenure. Dr. Vandegrift surprised many with the September 28th announcement of his retirement effective July 2012. Dr. Vandegrift previously served as Provost, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Chief Information Officer, and Professor of Chemistry at Georgia Southern University. Dr. Vaughn Vandegrift, welcome to Conversation.
Happy to be here.
This has been a long time since you've been with us. I looked at the records. It was, believe it or not, January of '06.
Yes, well, then we were beginning to talk about what milestones we had in mind for SIUE, and now we're back here 5 years later talking about what's been accomplished.
Right. So I asked you off the air before this all got started, whether you liked being a chancellor. So let's just cover that. Did you like being here?
I did, and I do, and especially at SIUE. It's a great place, and it's a very strong sense of community that exists on the campus, and I think anybody would love to be a part of this. So I expect that after I retire, they'll be able to find another chancellor that will happy to be on the journey to lead them to more excellence. You
just said when they find somebody, there is going to be some sort of a national search. How does that work?
There'll be a national search. It'll be conducted through the President's office.
That's Dr. Poshard's office in Carbondale?
President Poshard's office in Carbondale. There'll soon be some announcements about how that's going to take place. But ultimately, he'll be responsible for finding my replacement and recommending that person to the board.
Mm-hmm. What sort of a transition do you... I used to be a Navy officer, and so whenever somebody new was coming in, there was like, there was a transition that occurred. Guys would get together and talk about, this is what I was doing, this is how I did it. And is that what you envision will be happening with your replacement?
Yes, I think since it's a national search, we have no idea who the person will be. So at this point, we couldn't have any transition. But once the person is identified, that process will take 6 months. There'll be meetings and documents that I'll leave and discussions that will be had and those sorts of things so that the individual will fully understand what's gone on at the university and how it's positioned for its next level of excellence.
I date so far back that I actually knew John Rendelman. I met him when I was a young guy at the time, and mm-hmm. he was the they called them presidents then instead of chancellors.
Yes.
And, so I knew him in the early days when I had first come to SIU, which was a very, very different institution than it is today. It was just a couple of buildings and students that drove in. There was no dormitories, no nothing like that. Now you have places for people to stay on campus, don't you?
Yes. Well, first let me say I think of John Rendelman a lot. The building I work in is named after John Rendelman. I sit at the same desk that John Rendelman used. It still has the same cracked drawer on the left side.
Is that right?
Yes, it's been there through all the chancellors, and not something I would have ever wanted to change. But you're right, we've become much more of a residential university. The Carnegie classification system now classifies SIU as a primarily residential university. We have more residential students than we have commuting students. If you count the fact that there are residential students who moved here from Chicagoland or from Springfield and rent in the area. With the 3,500 students we have living on campus and the approximately 4,000 or so that moved to the area just to attend SIUE but live off the campus, that makes us more than 50% residential now, although we still have a very strong commuting population.
So people living in Edwardsville are counted towards the residential number?
Yes, I count them toward the residential number. I'm not sure exactly how Carnegie counts them, but they do classify us as primarily residential. But in my mind, anybody who moves here from Chicago or Springfield rents, or sometimes the parents buy a place for the student to go for 4 years. I count that as a residential population. Those students come to class in the morning, they stay all day, they're engaged in activities, studies, and so forth. So to me, they're as valuable an asset in terms of counting residential population as those who actually live on campus. But there are 3,500 living on campus.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
Well, it is a lot, and if you're on campus every day, you see it in terms of how the university has progressed. We've moved to what universities who are residential campuses do. We've changed all of our sports programs, so now that we're going to be Division I in every sport, we are, as a matter of fact, already, and we're finishing the certification process from the NCAA. We're members of the Ohio Valley Conference in all of our sports, except for soccer, which plays in the Missouri Valley Conference, and wrestling that competes in the Southern Conference. So that move to Division I athletics is a very important statement about us being a residential full-service campus. And except for SLU, St. Louis University, we are the only Division I playing university in the entire 2.9 million metropolitan St. Louis serving area. So people will be hearing a lot more about SIUE in the future as we compete in events. They'll see us on the crawl on TV, and we'll be in national rankings and those sorts of things for athletics. So we've already cracked the national rankings for our academics and for our other programs. You may have heard that the U.S. News and World Report for the third year in a row has ranked SIUE among just 46 universities in the entire country as up-and-coming universities. And
what's meant by that?
Well, they actually define that. They say for recent progress in academics, in facilities, in student life, and other areas of the university. So we've also been ranked 2 years in a row by the Washington Monthly magazine as in the top 50 of 553 public and private master's comprehensive universities, which is how we're classified in the United States. And that's for how we serve students and the work that our students do participating in community work and some of the university service work like at the East St. Louis Center or at our Alton Dental Clinic. And that's for
people who are not familiar, it's not just the campus in Edwardsville that's part of SIUE, is it? I mean, you have this East St. Louis facility, you have the dental school in Alton. Is there something else as well? Those
are our two main the main campus sites. On campus, we have a School of Pharmacy and School of Nursing, along with School of Engineering, School of Business, Education, all of the arts and sciences, and I'm not sure I mentioned pharmacy, but we are a unique institution. Now, people who live in the region may not be aware of the uniqueness of this institution. Now, there's a reason why it's unique. It grew out of Carbondale. It grew out of Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and as a result of having grown out of that campus, it was able to garner things like an engineering program, which most of the regional universities don't have, or a nursing program, or pharmacy program, or others. But it really does establish this university as very different from others, even in Illinois, very different from Western or Eastern or Illinois State. And I think part of this uniqueness is why we've been able to break enrollment records 4 years in a row. There are lots of things that are offered at the university that are not offered elsewhere.
You mentioned the engineering school. I've had 2 deans in a row come here and tell me that they'll put their engineering school up against WashU any day.
Well, we have very capable students and faculty. The average ACT in the engineering program for students is now over 27, which is very
good.
That's very competitive. When you have a student with that kind of ability who works hard, there's very little they can't accomplish. And in fact, our engineering program is succeeding so well that we're in the process now of putting an addition onto the building. We have...
I remember when you built that building.
It just opened in 2000 or 2001, something around there. Now there'll be an addition. We are up to 1,200 engineering students. More than 1,000 of them are undergraduates. The other are graduate students. And we offer every engineering except for chemical engineering that provides a really broad base for students, and the engineering school has done quite well.
Now, you're a chemist by training, correct?
Correct, yeah, biochemist.
And the chemistry department, well, at least when I was around, was in the science building. Is it still there? And what's going on? The science building was getting kind of old. I mean, what's happening with that?
Well, we are building a new science building. You're right, it was in a bad shape. It was one of the original buildings, but of all the original buildings, some were better constructed than others. They were all built by different folks. But the science building, new one, is now under construction. It's actually part of a $250 million campaign we have got going on at the university for building and infrastructure. We built an addition onto the student center called the Student Success Center, the Morris University Center addition. We built a pharmacy school. Now we're building a science building in addition to the engineering building, in addition to the art and design building, in addition to the athletics complex over at the Vidalabine Center, which will be called the Lucas Complex. And we are now planning to build a nursing building. So there's been a lot of strong growth at the university in terms of enrollment. And despite the fact that in some other universities they've had to lay people off or furlough people, and despite the economic problems of the state, our strong enrollments have enabled us to commit to building this $250 million building project. And I think people, if they haven't been on campus in a while, I would invite them to come up and see what's going on the campus. I think they'll truly be amazed.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, by the way, every so often I always drive through just to see what's going on there. And sometimes I have to play dumb here to get people to talk about stuff that other folks, because people in St. Louis, and then this will also appear on YouTube worldwide, so there'll be folks that'll be seeing this that know nothing about SIU except what we say here. But you had mentioned, where was I going with that? You had mentioned that that the university is part of of Illinois, and that the government of Illinois had some financial problems, and I'm just wondering how that has affected, or have you worked around the problems that the state of Illinois has? I know that, for example, the school system in Edwardsville has not been paid a lot of money for the last couple of years.
Yes.
Has SIU had that same problem, and how have you worked around it?
We've experienced difficulties, of course. There have been cuts in the budget, and we've managed those things. There have been some tuition increases along the way as well. We've had severe freezes or slowdowns in hiring for a period of time, excuse me, while we've tried to manage through. When the state has cut our budget, we've budgeted, I think, conservatively. We've not added staff. The only people we added were faculty to teach the classes. Mm-hmm. And so we've been able to manage through that. And as I said, the enrollment increases have been significant, and that's provided additional revenue. But for the most part, when we budgeted conservatively and took into account the MAID at the state level, the second problem we had was there were delays in payments. So we had a period of time, which we're still experiencing now, where the money comes in from the state very late. And so we had to make adjustments for that. In the end, in any fiscal year, they were able to get us the money they promised. So far, that has been true. But because it comes in slowly or late, we've had to make some adjustments. But by and large, I think at SIUE, we've been able to manage it as well as we could have. I like to joke that the university has done well through difficult times because it's well managed, but that's because I'm in charge, so mm-hmm. naturally I would think that. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that others aren't well managed, but that management, that conservative budgeting, working with a sharp pencil, plus our strong enrollment gains have enabled us to make it through difficult times in pretty good stead.
What sort of budget does a university of your size spend?
The university has a budget of about $250 million a year, $250 million. If you count the amount of money that the state pays for benefits, it's probably closer to $300 million. But of that $250 million, about $100 million runs the auxiliary services, the residence halls, food services, things that students pay specific fees for. Mm-hmm. The remaining money is about 75 or 80 million in tuition, and the remainder is the money that the state provides the university each year, which is on the order of $65 million a year. It's a very large operation, It's like a little city. We not only have 3,500 people living on campus, we have our own sewage system, we have our own food services, we have our own protection service, our own police force, and almost anything that, for example, a mayor of a city would have to deal with, you'll find in a residential campus like SIUE.
You have a beautiful campus, and it's enormous. It's like 1,200 acres, or I forget.
2,660
acres.
acres.
Yeah. And I'd swear that I read somewhere back there that it might be the largest campus in the United States.
I've heard that said. I can't verify it. I don't know that it's the largest, but it certainly is large.
I mean, you still have huge areas of woods, of lakes, deer running around, all kinds of wildlife on campus.
We do, and you know, different universities find themselves in different positions, of course, geographically, and because we have such a large campus, we are surrounded, so to speak, by the rest of Edwardsville, yet we are a part of Edwardsville. And that means you have to make a deliberate attempt to get on the campus or to get off the campus. And I think that in some ways that helps the sense of community that we have on campus. When you're on campus, you feel like you're in a special place. You almost feel like you're in a sacred place because it's so beautiful. And because you have to be deliberate in terms of driving to get onto the campus, it creates this entire different sense of community that I think the campus has benefited from over the years. And I've always said in the time I've been here that the sense of community on campus is the best thing about this university. And I'll just say one other thing, that when I talk at Rotary clubs or Lions clubs or whatever, I talk about the great sense of values that our students have. And in fact, we have 5 values for the university that we emphasize with our students: wisdom, openness, integrity, citizenship, and excellence. And I say to people in the region, is it any wonder the university is doing so well? They're your children. Or they're the children of your brothers or sisters, or you know, their nephews or nieces. We have a very, very giving and generous student population of their time, as I mentioned, by those Washington monthly rankings, which in part measure how much students give back to the region. And I think that says a lot about the kind of region we're in and the kind of students we attract in terms of the parents that send them to SIUE.
Prior to our discussion here, I always do research before my guests come, but you know, I wanted to have a little more background and talk about the purpose of a college education. So I just went to Google and started, you know, typing in just a few questions, you know, like, what's the purpose of a college education? It's amazing the students who would write articles that wind up on the internet. Mm-hmm. Some of them talk about, well, it just seems like we're here just to learn how to get a job or to do a job. But I thought we were supposed to be here, or others actually were saying, well, I'm here because I want to be more well-rounded. I'm looking for, you know, more understanding of the arts. There's those guys that talk about, well, I'm in chemistry, but folks need to know a little bit more about the arts, or the arts people need to know more about business. What's your thinking about the purpose of SIU and what you have tried to get these students to be as young adults?
Well, I have saying, Lee, that we're in the human potential business. That really, what the purpose of higher education is, it really lies in the fulfillment of human potential. But there are 2 things I'd say about that fulfillment of human potential. First of all, most parents and most students going to college will, of course, choose a career where they feel they can make a contribution, and one in which they can make a livelihood. Mm-hmm. And there isn't any doubt that if you look at all the data that's there nationally, that on average, if you have an undergraduate degree, you will make in your lifetime more money than on average someone who doesn't have a degree. Okay. So naturally, people are going to say there's an economic benefit to getting an education. But you know, what is the economic benefit to the public? That's the real question, or the benefit to the public. Well, there are 2. First of all, someone who has a better job is more likely to be a good citizen, more likely not to break laws, more likely not to be incarcerated, more likely to pay taxes, more likely to contribute to the benefit of the public, and everybody benefits. So that's one thing. But the second thing is, which I think is really important, is it's the job of the universities to develop the citizens of a democracy for the next generation. And there's a saying that democracy can't be inherited, it has to be relearned in every generation. And no, students may not be consciously aware of it at the time they're in school, in college. We require them to take courses called the general education component that are separate and distinct from their major or their interests. They don't always like it. Why should I take an art course if I'm going to be an engineer? Why should I take a music course? But in the end, when they graduate, they realize that those things broaden them. Their better understanding of the arts, if they're engineers, or a better understanding of engineering if they're in the arts, or what have you. And people are more likely to understand the need for the diversity of different interests and so forth that take place in a democracy. Mm-hmm. So my view is that we're educating the next members, contributing members of a democracy. And I think that's really important. And so I think that despite the fact that we might be having some difficult times financially in this country, that there's a real value in continuing to support higher education in general. And of course, I've given my life to public higher education. Mm-hmm. I do think there's a value in a tax scholar going to help educate a student to get a college degree. I think that those tax dollars will come back to the public later on, and for all the reasons I just talked about. But I think ultimately, the better educated we have this United States, the better the future for the United States is going to be. That's my belief, and that's why I'm so supportive of the educational enterprise in which I'm working.
And what's your feeling about the junior college systems that are both in Illinois or just in general?
I think they're essential. They're absolutely essential for a couple of reasons. First of all, many students aren't ready for college right out of high school, or they might be working out of high school and they want to get a 4-year degree, but they're not ready. They need to hone their skills and get back into it. And I think the 2-year colleges are there and are very effective at providing the kind of remedial work or get back into it kind of work that are needed before a student finishes a 4-year degree. And secondly, it's a very effective way to drive down the cost of a 4-year degree. Everybody knows that a 4-year residential campus costs more than a community college, although I have to say at this point that the cost of going to SIUE is the lowest of any state public university, anyone you can name. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless...
And that's true, by the way. I mean, he's not just saying that.
No, it's true.
SIU is a real bargain.
But we've signed an agreement, for example, with Lewis and Clark Community College in our serving region and SWIC, Southwestern Illinois College, that enables students to be admitted to SIUE from the day they go to the community college, but they can get the remedial work or other work that they need to get started in their major at the community college, spend 2 years there at a lower cost, and then transfer to SIUE and complete their 4-year degree. So I think that they serve a great purpose. Also, the community colleges, more than the 4-year colleges, have vocational programs, electrical training, carpenter training, and those kinds of things that enable people to get good work in the trade and in the trades and become productive citizens in that way, working through the trades. So I think that they have a strong role to play. And moreover, I think that the 2-year community colleges and the 4-year universities should work together, and we are.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to ask you, just as an educator, not as Chancellor of SIU, and we got about 5 minutes here. Mm-hmm. There have been people sitting in that chair who are from St. Louis Public Schools. And we talk about how is it that in St. Louis Public Schools, 50% of the students that start there drop out, and of the other 50%, about half might be functionally illiterate when they get out. How is this possible in our society?
Well, I suppose if I had a simple answer, I'd be running for presidential office or something. But
from your point of view,
from my point of view, there's no doubt that there are 2 factors that are required for success in education. Number one is the home. You've got to have strong expectations. I talk about our university, and I say, university is just like a person. Every summer, we have this goal to be nationally recognized for the excellence of our programs and development community leaders. I talked a little bit about how we've gotten some of that national recognition. We sit down every summer as a university and ask, what do we need to do better? Where are we need to be stronger, and those kinds of things. And that in a student's life, typically direction is made by the parents. The parents say, this is what you need to work on, this is the expectation. So we need that. Where we don't have that, there are things that can support it. Head Start programs, I think, have been shown to be very valuable. And then after that, I'd say it's, good quality teachers. You have to have expectations at home, and you have to have expectations in school. Now, to some degree, there are environments around that need to be worked on too. You need to feel safe when you go to school and know that you're not going to be in fights and things like that. But if those three things can be worked on, I think that the dropout rate, the attrition rate's going to be less. But obviously, there are big challenges there, and I don't know that I have simple answers for how to address those challenges.
So in the last couple of minutes, is there anything that you would like to address that we haven't talked about yet here?
Well, I'd just like for the people in this viewing area to know, and I think many of them already do, what a great jewel they have in SIUE. It's been my privilege to serve it for the 8 years I will have been Chancellor by the time my retirement comes around in June. This university has a mission, it has a plan. We expect to be recognized nationally, and we are receiving recognition. I mentioned some of it. I always say, for doing the right things and doing them well. That's the mantra of SIUE. Do the right thing, do it well, and the recognition will come. And I think people who don't know about the university, if they have children that are interested in attending, or if they just want to get reacquainted, if they'll come and look at our programs, our students and our faculty, they will see that we deserve the national attention we're getting. This is a great, great opportunity here for people to understand all the values of SIUE, and I think there's a gem here for them.
It's, as you said, inexpensive for Illinois in-state students to go to SIUE. Is there any break for people who live in the Missouri side nearby, in St. Louis County? Yes,
as a matter of fact, there is. We call it the Geographical Enhancement Program. For higher achieving students in St. Louis, we will provide them a tuition rate that's closer to the in-state rate. They should check with our admissions office, but we provide, what we want to do is give opportunity to students that aren't just from Illinois, but students that come over from Missouri or from other places that will help diversify our student population and have talents that will contribute to a better education for all of our students. So the answer is yes, they should check with our admissions office, but we do have those opportunities.
Very good. Well, unfortunately, as you know, because you've been on television before, time runs pretty quickly here. You said earlier when we were off the air that when you're done, you're done. You're not taking another job anywhere else, right?
No, I've said if I'm lucky, I'll retire here, and I'm fortunate, and I'll be retiring here. After this, it'll be grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren. I don't have any of them in the area. So we want to get to where we can see them, and my wife and I have a lot of travel planned.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me,
Dr. Vandegrift. I've been speaking with Vaughn Vandegrift. He is the Chancellor of Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, a great school, my alma mater, a couple of times over. I have several degrees from there. And to those of you who are interested, I'd suggest you go to that website that's been showing on the screen. To the rest of you, we'll see you next week. Thank you.